days after the kidnapping of about 25 school pupils, today we hear another news of another kidnapping. Now, how might the resurgence of mass kidnappings in the northern Nigeria affect regional security dynamics in West Africa, particularly in border-sharing states like Ghana that have so far tried to avoid such attacks?
Thank you very much. You see, because West Africa is so intertwined, is so integrated informally, any development in terms of security-wise in any of these countries will have a wider repercussion for the region. And what's happening in Nigeria is just part of the continuum of insecurity challenges that stretch throughout the Sahel. And although Nigeria's case is a little bit of a lower side, it speaks to the continuous operation of Islamic jihadists across West Africa that continue to wreak havoc in many of these countries. So as these attacks continue, we expect people to move away from the northern half of Nigeria. Some may head south, and some may automatically try to seek refuge in safer grounds, maybe Ghana, maybe Cote d'Ivoire, and any other place that they think that their lives are better off. So, and of course, it also speaks to the fact that if we do not unite as a sub-region to deal with this in all the parts that they are happening, sooner than later, it may spread to the places that we think are safe, because this is a whole regional complex. And so if we sit down and believe there's a Nigerian problem, sooner than later, it may hit us hard. So I think that's a West African region. We should be more coordinated in trying to respond to some of these challenges. Of course, Nigeria's problem is rooted in a very complex social, cultural, religious, and economic dynamics. And so in as much as we try to deal with it regionally, Nigeria must take more responsibility in trying to provide internal security for its own population.
Now, you called for unity, or you called on West African governments especially to unite to help address this issue. Now, President Donald Trump has also cautioned the Nigerian government to take up measures to try and curb these terrorism attacks. How well do you believe that African governments can help protect their people and also help Nigeria address this issue?
I think that it's not only about Nigeria. It's, as I said, it's a regional complex that we are dealing with. Just as you have mentioned Nigeria, we could as well mention Burkina Faso. We could mention Mali. We can talk about Niger, and all these are the countries that are currently under terrorist siege. And you know that even in neighboring Togo, there were instances of terrorist attacks. So, as I said, the regional body ECOWAS have to be more proactive in coordinating both military responses. We need to beef up intelligence gathering, and we must include communities in intelligence gathering. For example, if we look at the latest attack that we are discussing, you observe that the school opened without necessarily consulting the authorities in terms of security, because that region has an issue. That's why, for instance, the schools were closed down. So when the school decided to act outside the intelligence, the intelligence that the security services have gathered, you open up yourself for this attack. So I think that's a region we must invest more in our security. We must invest more in border security. We must invest more in intelligence gathering to be able to facilitate dealing with some of these attacks that we are seeing around the region. So I believe that as West Africa, we must set aside a fund in terms of tooling our security agencies, in terms of tooling border protection agencies. We must begin to build borders that both allow people to cross and dictate some of these things. And if you look at how these terrorists have operated, they normally use very porous border regions where the state seems to be absent. So that also tells West African nations that they need to take livelihood options around those regions more seriously. They recruit young people who have been frustrated after years of unemployment and so forth and so on. And those regions where the state presence is minimal, they become the alternative governance structures that operate in those regions. So sometimes they enter these communities first by providing things that the state should naturally have been providing, like schools, like so. Then they begin to recruit and train because then they provide a little bit of relief to these people before they get the ground to recruit and attack. So we have to consider seriously how we go about issues such as youth unemployment, how we go about providing livelihood options for young people who are frustrated within the region. And that may also take a regional approach, making sure that government invests in areas that generate growth so that young people will have jobs to do in order not to be recruited by these groups. And we must also, as I indicated earlier, we must invest more into coordinated border management strategies so that we are working collectively to monitor cross-border activities that these networks are exploiting. So there's a lot we could do as a sub-region. There's a lot we could do. Of course, when Donald Trump said that if Nigeria doesn't take action, it's also putting pressure on Nigeria, and for that matter, the sub-region. So if we have a coordinated plan, if we decided to tackle this as a region, we may as well solicit the help of those powers like the US, like the Russians, in terms of intelligence, in terms of equipment. And many of our militaries, many of our border management agencies are operating with very obsolete equipment. And so we need to retool them. We need to modernize them. We need to even give them men. Sometimes if you look at the human resource of some of these security agencies that are supposed to contain this upset, there is nothing to write home about. So the West African countries must realize that they have a lot to do working collectively to provide security within the region. They have a lot to gain working collectively to improve livelihood and the economy of the region. We must begin to contain corruption in the public service because that also fuels a sense of living among riches while you are poor, and that make it easy for these groups to recruit. So there's a lot we can do together, improving governance within the region, forestalling the president and elected officials coming to power through very fraudulent elections, so that the legitimacy of our leaders is not questioned. That give rise to groups to employ some of these tactics to destabilize the region. So there's a lot we can do together as a region. Of course, a lot is already happening, but we must begin to upscale what we are doing in order to forestall some of these occurrences.
All right, Dr. Hlovor, you mentioned a lot is already happening, but we need to upscale them. Now, do you think that it's time for Nigeria to rather go to Trump or the United States for collaboration to help address this issue of terrorism in the country rather than they come in with force?
Thank you very much. I think that already just by saying that Nigeria is a country of concern has put pressure on the Nigerian administration to act. Do Nigeria need the United States? I think that Nigeria as a country has the wherewithal to be able to contain this. If they can unite as a country, if they can put aside the political division, the religious division, the ethnic division, and realize that these happenings are giving them a common bad name and damaging their ability to rise as an economic giant of Africa. I think that they could do this even without the help of external powers. But having said that, we live in the global village where we all need help one form or another. So it will be possible for the Nigerian administration if they decide that there are areas that they need external help, they could have a plan. If they have that plan, they could elicit the support of the United States. Not only the United States, the Russians are there, the Chinese are there. Any of those powers that they think is in a position to help them, they should not. It's not a crime to call for support if you're a nation going through some of these difficulties. So, but the bottom line is that Nigeria itself has to have a plan as to how to contain this. And that plan must be multifaceted in the sense that it should not only focus purely on issues of military security, it should focus on other aspects of security, such as economic security. How do young people, particularly in the northern half, get jobs? How do you provide a sense of nationality among those people. And of course, then as I said, they can't call the United States for her, but then much of the work lies with the Nigerian government. And so what we are seeing in Nigeria is the typical case of African countries struggling to construct nations out of the many ethnicities that have been bequeathed to them by their colonial leaders. So there's the need to create a common Nigerian identity that supersedes the ethnic division and the religious divisions. Those are works that will take a lot of investment into education, a lot of investment into changing people's mindset, and those aspects cannot be dealt with militarily. So, in as much as in the short term military interventions will work, they must have a multifaceted approach, as I said earlier, that deal with various aspects of this challenge. Because if you make it too much military, the danger is that there may be excesses in military operation that rather aggrieve people, and then they will decide to seek vengeance, and then it leads to a cycle of repeated violence. So yes, military intervention is currently needed to contain them. But beyond the military intervention, which we may rely on the United States for help, because of course they are still the unchallenged when it comes to military might. Currently you have the Chinese who have come up strongly. You have the Russians. All these have intelligence gathering capabilities, weapons that you may need to fight this insurgency. But beyond that, then you need to deal with the root causes. The root causes lie in religious, ethnic, and economic challenges that have bequeathed, particularly the northern half of Nigeria for years. So there is the need to develop the northern half of Nigeria. There is need for investment into public infrastructure, schools that can provide education that give people a sense of being Nigerian and so forth and so on. So without dealing with that, even if you call for a cooperation with major powers, it may stabilize the situation for the time being, but thereafter you may have resurgence, recurring situations. So the approach should not only be military; it should be grounded in such a way that all aspects of this problem are tackled once and for all.